All right, so here we go. So just to give people a heads up, this is going to be my last live MEC session. For those that don't know, I've transitioned into a new role at BeatStars. I'm now the COO of BeatStars. So now I will not have the time on a weekly basis. The MEC will still exist. The podcast will still exist. But my live MEC sessions will not be happening anymore. This will be the last one. Thankfully, we are ending it with a bang. This is going to be a banger, not to put any pressure on Rory, but this is going to be a banger. There's going to be a ton of gems. So I'm super excited to make this conversation happen. It's been in the works for quite some time. We've gone back and forth to try to make it work. But he's here. So Rory Webb, appreciate you joining us. Artist, manager, entrepreneur. He's got a lot of great experience that we'll jump into. But thanks for joining us today, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to finally catch up with you in this capacity. You know, I've been just a fan of the sessions and the podcast and everything you've been doing. And, you know, I think even between you and I is like history going back. I think it just had to happen at some point because I feel like, you know, taken back to when we really met at, you know, I was working at a PR company when I first moved to New York, and Funk Volume was one of the clients for the PR company, and really like being able to work with you guys in that capacity where, you know, what you guys were doing was so outside the box, for lack of a better term, from, you know, I think so many of the other artists we were working with, and just in general, the industry at that time, where I think, you know, where some people might see Saba or Pivot Gang at now, I think what you and Funk Volume did, and being able to have that chance to even work with you guys in that way and see how the shows were going, like people could, like in New York when you guys would come on tour and seeing people come out, and just the way you all operated was, I think for me specifically, like a huge influence and inspiration and learning just moment of like seeing how you guys were able to do that I think has played a part in, you know, the way we've operated and I've operated as a manager.
That's dope, man. That's great to hear. So you are the artist manager for Saba, Pivot Gang, and is it Fig or FIG? It's
Yeah,
Fig.
Fig. So she's like a new artist. She's from Malaysia, but she came over to New York for school, and oddly enough, I found her, like she posted a video, like a dance video on Instagram to a Pivot Gang song.
Okay.
And kind of just discovered her through that, which is not how I've typically found artists. And even, you know, through the roster you've mentioned, like I'm very selective with kind of the artists and timing of when I've like went on to managing someone else or working with other people. But it caught my attention. And then from clicking around, I could see that she had like a couple of songs out at the time. And then she was in New York. So we just got up, hung out, and I feel like it kind of developed from there. But I think it's just another story to show that it's, you know, I feel like between the relationships of like artists and meeting their managers, or managers finding artists, is like, it can come through so many ways. And a lot of other, I mean, and other managers can find artists in different ways. But I think like, for me at least, it's always just been like a moment of, and really building a relationship with the artist and connecting with them and feeling like there's like a chemistry there.
Sure. Did you want to be an artist manager? Did you set out to be an artist manager? Like, how did this come to be? Because like you said, we met, you were working at a PR firm, you know, and then eventually, you know, at some point you met Saba, but how did that materialize?
Yeah, I think my passion, I would say I probably started feeling like maybe, what would it be, like 2011 or so. Like I really got into like the local scene. I'm from Pittsburgh, so I really got into like the local music scene there, and just wanted to contribute in some way. Like I wasn't an artist myself, but I really started to like kind of find interest in just artist development. And I think at that time I was a huge fan of music or of hip hop, but I wasn't necessarily bringing skills to the table. And so granted, you know, in a local scene like that, I'm probably one of a handful of people that are not artists, because I think a lot of like in a lot of smaller cities, that community is made up of way more artists than other people that are playing different roles. So I think really for me at that time, there was a huge spotlight on Pittsburgh from like Wiz Khalifa and Rostrum's success. And I kind of got to see like someone like Mac Miller go from, you know, playing probably his first shows to performing world tours, and really seeing, or really just, you know, with that spotlight being on Pittsburgh, I figured I can, you know, I know about hip hop and about music, and I'm in the scene. So there was a lot of interest from people outside of it to cover the scene just from like Wiz's success. So I might not have been the best writer, but thankfully I had a couple good editors. And by being in the scene, I was able to kind of document it, which I think led to, one, it's still kind of a part of artist development. Like I was able to find a way to make myself valuable to them. And it also kind of helped lead me into finding some mentors and people, whether in the music industry or in different like other fields, kind of like off of it. But it really helped me find a couple good mentors that were, you know, part of that scene or an extension of that scene. That then from getting involved in journalism, I didn't really want to pursue journalism. I still was more into like that, like I said, the artist development, but just wanted to keep building my skill set and wanted to get to New York because I was starting to make like trips back and forth, and got the opportunity to work at the PR company. And really just by, you know, getting from Pittsburgh to New York, I was able to build my network over, you know, a year or two pretty quickly, just by being in a city like that has so much going on. And so once I felt like I had a skill set from like learning that PR marketing side, and also a network of relationships where I could add value for someone, I think is the moment where I was like, okay, I'm ready to actually step into a management role now. Because even in Pittsburgh at the time, or even working at the PR company, there's so many artists and teams I work with that are not good managers. That like, is someone just playing the role, which it's like, cool. A lot of people, you know, ideally everyone would learn as they go and like get better. But I think I was hesitant to take on that title before I felt like I could add value.
What do you think? What are some of the things you saw in managers that were not good? Like, what were they doing that you were like, yeah, this person probably isn't serving this artist in the best capacity?
I mean, I think there's like a certain kind of like professionalism, whether it's through a call, a text, or an email, that I think I probably took for granted what I like was able to, however I learned how to like do those things properly. Because I think a lot of people are not really great at communicating in that way. And, you know, I think even thinking about it too, is an extension into, you know, I'd be on calls with artists and their label that the manager would be on too. And sometimes the manager will be quiet and the artist is yelling at the label. And like, I think there's like when a manager's in a situation that they can't communicate things to an artist so that the artist feels like they don't have to lash out.
Right.
You know, because I think that's a lot of the times probably where an artist's frustration could come from, is a lack of understanding of things, because the artist isn't going to be on every email or on every call. Right. So if the manager isn't taking certain information and taking it back to the artist and reassuring them or making them feel okay about something. Not that I ever had an artist like come at me as a PR person for like not doing a job or anything, but I think that's something that could happen if it's like, why did nobody write about this song? If the manager is not taking what I'm telling them and relaying it to the artist, or, you know, and I think even as I learned and got into the management role, I think building that trust with a Saba or any artist that I'm working with to kind of also like see a more long-term vision, or have a more long-term vision. Because I think it can be really easy to get caught up in having certain expectations for, say, a song release. And if it doesn't get 1,000 plays or 10,000 plays or 1,000,000 plays in a week, that artist might get frustrated by it. And if a manager doesn't know how to go to them and say, here's why it's doing this or why it's not doing that, and why it still was worth releasing that song, or helping them just see a fuller vision so that it's kind of building towards something, as opposed to getting caught up in individual things like that.
Yeah, establishing and managing expectations is one of the most difficult things to do, whether it's with your artist, whether it's with the label, whether it's with other people as you're building out your team around Saba or the artist that you're working with. That communication is definitely crucial. At what point and how did you meet Saba?
So my partner Christella was working at a management company and independent label that was also a client of the PR company I was at. And so she and I just connected as kind of two, at the time, younger people at our companies that would we might be setting up the conference call between the companies. But just in those few minutes between, built a relationship where we would share music with each other. And I think we're just both genuine music fans. And she had met him when he came out and played at, I think, Hyro Day in Oakland, which would have been maybe 2015. So she had met him there, and I think he had another manager at the time, but it seemed like they were maybe going their separate ways, or just figuring out what that next step was. And so she kind of got involved in a management role. He had like an instrumental project he was working on that they were looking for PR. So she reached out to me about it. And I was already a fan of him from a prior mixtape he had. And I was kind of it was also, timing hit me at a point where I felt like I was ready to take that leap if the right artist came along or the right situation came along. And he came, I think it was when CMJ was still happening in New York. So he came and had like a couple shows here, like October of 2015 or 2014. And I got a chance to like meet him and kick it and talk a little bit. Like kind of randomly, Andre 3000 was at the show that night. And,
Nice.
I'm like New York PR guy where I'm like, hey, there's Andre 3000. Let's go say what's up. I'll introduce you guys. Where he's meeting me for the first time. So he probably thinks like, I think he was thinking I maybe already knew him, but I was just like, in New York, anybody could be you could be at a show and see somebody, and like, I just with that, particularly at that time, was like very much like, let me just go say hi, exchange contacts. It's not a big deal. It's just another person. And so I was able to like introduce them and kind of like, just, take a photo. But like, I think just him seeing how I managed even that situation at least stuck with him to where then maybe a week or two later, when I proposed the idea of coming on as like a co-manager, it was something they were open to. And I think I put together like a 1 year, 3 year kind of vision or plan that I kind of saw from probably more so on like a marketing PR space. But it was also such a different time. Like Spotify didn't exist. I think his music was, or like just started. And so his music was really, I think, only on SoundCloud at that point. And so, but really, yeah, it was kind of came about in that way, to answer your question. And then, but I think it was some of those initial steps too, me putting that 3 year plan together and kind of just being able to figure out how I could add value into the structure that they already had in place. Because I think also he produces a lot of his own music, where it's like, if I was meeting an artist that I like as a manager, they needed someone to connect them with producers, I might not be the right guy, because that's not really like my Rolodex or my network. But I think for what each of our roles were and what each of our experience was, it just all kind of fit. And then we just gradually built from there, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, these days, artist managers are required to do so much, but I think, your foundation, it's a very healthy foundation for, obviously the skill sets you have, but then to start to build the other skills that I think are necessary to become a successful manager. So you were working with Saba at a pretty early age in his career. Like you said, Spotify wasn't a huge deal yet. Most of his music was on SoundCloud. But through this journey, it's always a series of wins and just building on wins. That's how I see it. It's like, okay, so early on, what do you feel like were some of those wins that you were like, okay, we did this, and then we did this, and you just kind of building momentum over time? What were some of those early wins, do you think?
I would say one of the first things I remember is a Europe tour. It was the first tour I did with him, which was like really crazy in retrospect. Again, it's like when I was getting into this role, I never really envisioned myself being like someone that would go out on the road with an artist. It was I mean, some of those experiences now have been like some of the best of my life. And I think it's just such a unique experience to be able to do those things. But, you know, first time doing it, I was booking hotels or Airbnbs that were like an hour outside of the city because they were the cheapest ones. And we're trying to spend the least amount of money. Meanwhile, I quickly learned that it's going to cost more to take a car an hour outside of the city.
Right. So the Europe tour, so when his music was on SoundCloud, was it doing so well that just off the base of his SoundCloud streams, like he was able to book a tour, or was this a part of somebody else's tour?
He was opening for another artist.
Okay.
I think it may have been, no, it was before the first album I released with him. So it was like early 2016. But I think it was really off like the momentum of the mixtape that he released in 2014. And then he had just released, Chance the Rapper released Angels that featured him.
Okay.
And so it's kind of on the heels of that kind of stuff. But you know, it's just that in and of itself was just such a crazy experience to like jump into something like that. That was probably 5-6 months after we started working together for like, and we were out there. So just seeing like the potential, I think that was probably an early thing of seeing like really the potential of it. Because even going there, people were singing along to songs and I think connected with his music in a way that felt different from the average artist. And I think even some of his early New York shows, seeing him as a performer, I would think of as like, you know, he had already done some like small regional tours, and I think maybe done New York once or twice before I had met him. But I think for me, at least, seeing just the way he engaged the crowd, because I think some of those New York shows, at least when I started, were almost like the Pigeons and Planes, No Ceilings, and some of these like, you have fans there, but it's also a lot of industry people that if you're not a great performer, or you don't have that stage control or audience control, it can be easy to be performing and while people are like talking to the person next to them. And there was one show at Rough Trade in New York where he just like basically was yelling at the crowd, but did it in a way that got their attention. And like by the end of his set, he had everybody with their hand in the air and like just had that charisma or the charismatic kind of element to him that I think was also just another huge like selling point to like me seeing that he's, I think, a generational artist that can really just connect with people and reach an audience in a special way. So I think a couple of those things, but you know.
For sure. So obviously he has music that connects with people. You just talked about his live show is probably way above average. That's another thing that kind of continues to propel him. From the outside looking in, it seems like he has a lot of very solid relationships. How did he start to build with some of these artists? Because I know he has features with like Smino and just a lot of bigger artists that I think that's one of the reasons why like some independent artists kind of stay where they're at. Like they don't really build and connect with other artists that are doing amazing things. How is this happening for Saba?
Definitely. Yeah. I think, and that's something he really like speaks about just, you know, a lot, because I think he sees how significant that was to his growth and his career, where in Chicago, they had really, it seems like a couple like youth community organizations that really kind of got young kids around, one, like a couple of mentors that could be around and kind of at least help them develop them. And then also gave them access to like resources such as a computer, keyboards, things like that, or like music production equipment, studios. And on top of that, it also, you know, resulted in kids coming from different parts of the city where you're going to meet people that have similar interests to you, that I think, you know, a lot of artists, you know, like even speaking about, you know, Pittsburgh for me was like so important to have that scene and community there at the time to give me like something to tap into. But I think, I don't know how it is now. I think I'm sure there's still like local scenes. But I think really, yeah, it was through those organizations that he connected with Chance, No Name, Mick Jenkins, like a lot of that Chicago scene. And he also had like a home studio that he had built in like his grandma's basement, and his dad is a musician as well. So I think his dad really helped kind of like guide him, or like at least help establish and figure out what are the things you need to like start making music. But really, you know, I think it was those community youth organizations that planted those seeds, and then from there it was, he might go out to like Chance got him on Acid Rap, and then had him on Angels, and then through that, you know, Chance had him open for him on Wild and Out one time, like a few years ago.
Nice.
And you know, so I think because that community of artists connected at such an early age, they've like really strongly looked out for each other and wanted to, you know, Saba's got Aaron Allen Kane on a couple of songs on this new album, who's someone that he worked with first on Comfort Zone on one of the singles. And like, similarly, I don't know that she was part of that same scene I was talking about, but still in that Chicago scene. And like his friend Benjamin Earl Turner, who's like, again, like just a friend of his for a long time, that he put him on the new album. So it's like, I think he really, that growing up, they had that scene and community in Chicago, and they've just really continued to like find ways to uplift each other and include each other in things that they're doing. But I think it really also just shows the power of like being in the orbit of like a superstar, like Chance kind of has been, you know, and just through that association, it put a spotlight on so many others that I think Saba's done the best, or one of the best jobs of actually like delivering on it, and also kind of carving out his own lane so that it's not stuck in that orbit in a way.
Yeah, I mean, obviously doing very well. I think he's, you know, past 2 million monthly listeners on Spotify. But so speaking to specifically that, you know, what was his journey like to that number, to 2 million? And I know that he probably has goals and to get way beyond that. But, you know, for people that are listening to these sessions in our podcast, you know, 2 million, that's like, wow, that's amazing. And it is amazing. So how do you feel like that happened? What were some of the main things to get to that presence on Spotify?
Man, I have problems with monthly listeners.
Right.
I hate that stat so much. It's similar with like Instagram followers, where, you know, like our agent will say, or I know people book festivals and do the lineups based on those two numbers, Instagram followers and monthly listeners. And like, yeah, I mean, it's great to be where he's at, and I can talk about that. But I just think like it's a very discouraging thing, I think, for a lot of new artists to see, because sometimes it can feel so out of reach. And a lot of the numbers, I think, are just like very easily manipulated. You know, we haven't really manipulated ours, but I feel like seeing other people do it makes me want to figure out how we can manipulate them, because I feel like there's artists that have 3 million monthly listeners that I know can't bring 100 people out to a show, let alone 1,000 or 2,000 like Saba is.
Right.
But knowing it is like a significant factor in the way people perceive artists, I think it was really just like a gradual thing for us. I think there's things that we probably did without thinking about how it would impact that did. Like for him, having like his most popular song on Spotify is Photosynthesis. That's a song from his 2016 album Bucket List Project. And we didn't release it as a single. We didn't do a video for it. We never put marketing or anything behind it. I don't know that it's ever gotten an editorial playlist, even as much as it's streamed now. I don't know, for whatever reason, they haven't put it in any catalog playlists, I don't think, or anything. And so that just became a song that I think people really loved. And it's set up in a way, like, even if you're not getting the editorial playlist things, there's like the Spotify radio and radar things that's really, it seems like, where it comes from, which though the placement in those areas, it seems like, come from people hearing it, liking it, saving it, adding it to their own library, adding it to their own playlist, so then it gets recommended in these other spaces. But a song like that's over 100 million on Spotify and still streams like around 2 million a month, which is more than any other song of his does. It's a song from 2016. And so, but it's like that, because it streams that well, I would like probably 500,000, 700,000 of his monthly listeners are from a song like that has just extended beyond even his audience. So I think like once you find a record or two that really like succeeds in extending outside of that audience that is already like activated and looking and listening to you, I think that has a huge impact on the monthly listeners in particular. And then it's also, a game of how if you're like if you're typically a featured artist on a song, if you get listed as a primary, it might boost your numbers up. But I think like seeing someone like JID did recently, where he's listed as a primary on the song with Imagine Dragons, and put him up over like 30 million monthly listeners, probably from, I imagine he was at like maybe 7 or 8 million. But I think doing that then put him on obviously it introduced him to other people through that, but I think it just builds a story to where then you can take that and get better festival billing. You can get better support from Spotify on your next single because they see, or at least it appears that way. I'm sure that audience is partially engaged with him, but I still think it's like a tricky number, where I imagine his followers are not drastically more than Saba's on Spotify, but the monthly listeners are like at another level. But it's tough because I think it's collaborations is probably the main way to like tap into more monthly listeners, just because like it's reaching outside of the people that are already following and tapped in with you.
For sure. No, there's definitely ways to game the system. Some ways are more genuine than others. But I feel like just everybody wants to be on playlists, right? I feel like that's that I think that's a bit overemphasized at times, where I think the people that are really generating a healthy income from streaming, healthy, consistent income, is doing what I think you guys have done, is building a loyal following that's listening consistently, playing it to their own playlists, saving the songs, things like that. That's how you really generate some consistency and some healthy streaming income, which it seems like you guys have done. I know that's probably one big revenue stream for you guys. Another, I'm assuming, is merch. So how does he think about his merch, and what's the operation like with your team?
Yeah, and just even finishing on your last point, like the consistency is like another really big thing for that, where between albums he released like a few loose singles, and one in particular, a song called Ziploc, has like kind of stood out or taken off a little bit. And I think a big part of that was he had a feature on Judas and the Black Messiah soundtrack, which was like a big look, that something like that introduced him to a new audience. And then we followed that up like a month later with that song. And I feel like because it followed up something like that, I think it helped really like just get it onto those release radar and that kind of stuff. So yeah, the consistency is honestly, that's probably the most important part. But yeah, the merch has been a huge thing, I think, that we've really developed and established over time, and have continued to like learn and find new ways to make it engaging, because you don't want to just keep selling. I mean, you kind of always want to be selling, I guess is the saying, but I think it's like finding new ways to make it engaging or interesting. And so I think particularly over the last 2 years, where touring was wiped out, and for a lot of artists, I think it was even hard to really create. Some people really thrived and created a lot, but I think for a lot of artists, it was like more difficult to create in that way because you're kind of isolated. And so, something we did with I guess he's getting to that point now where he has a catalog of music where we have these anniversaries. And so we celebrated the 3-year anniversary of his album Care For Me with like a reissue of the vinyl, which has been a huge success for us, even though it takes 6 to 8 months to get made, which is difficult. But and I think part of it is just seeing what people are buying and what they're not, and adjusting kind of as you're going with that. But that album in particular is just, I think a cult classic or classic amongst his fans, where there's going to be people that found it when it came out and will forever have a really special, hold a special place in their heart. And then there's other people that are finding it along the way as he features on J. Cole, Revenge of the Dreamers, or as he, releases a new album that'll go back and then find that album. And I think it just has proven at this point to be something that is going to connect with a lot of people. And so finding new ways to also do merch lines just with the font type or different things to just keep people engaged. And then, but yeah, really, really vinyl, I think, at least particular to the music, has just been like, I think a lot more people, I think, started buying vinyl over the last 2 years, in addition to people buying online even more. And really just kind of figuring out how to like space it. I think probably what we set out to do is like have one merch drop every 6 months or so that it's not like in your face we're not asking the same people to buy something every month, but I think every 6 months or so, it's like there's a different thing we can have or do or drop. And really even thinking about it too with this new album, we did this like merch collab that I'm wearing with Supervision, which is a brand in LA. So that was more like a higher end streetwear collaboration that we did. So there's that drop. There's a drop that we just did maybe a couple weeks before the tour that was actually came through like a designer tweeted him a couple of designs after the album drop, and we ended up making those. And so that was kind of like a, just kind of a Saba pivot merch drop.
Yeah.
And then now we have a third merch drop that's on the tour. And so it's like, I think just developing those different kind of, because some people will buy it all. So it's like, I think just being creative with it.
Yeah. So your strategy has been more to have like drops around, big things that you guys are doing. Are there some core like staple pieces, like, like Chance's 3 hat that just consistently that you guys are selling, or is it more just drop based?
We have, so our version of that probably would have been Saba's like Care for Me Care hat.
Okay.
But we had an issue with it. Like, I don't remember what the paperwork situation was with the designer, but it got tricky where he started selling them without us approving it. And we had to like just agree to kind of do separate things. But it's like we still have the font type. So we did design some different versions that just add like a small element to it. So, but even with that, we dropped some new versions whenever we did the like Care for Me anniversary drop, but it hasn't been like a staple that we keep in the store. There is some stuff from like his collective Pivot Gang that I think we keep just like logo tees or logo hoodies.
Yeah.
But it is something we've thought about, and I think eventually we'll figure out and have those staple pieces. But I think it's still kind of figuring out what those would be, which comes from, being kind of the fan favorites, I think. But but it's probably more centered around the like the Pivot Gang logo.
Yeah. Now, merch obviously is can be a healthy business for artists, especially if you have a strong community that really buys into what you guys are doing, and obviously you guys have that. But running a music business is essentially like 5 businesses in one, and like merch is one of those. So to continuously optimize, try different things, figuring out what makes the most sense for your audience,
definitely
is for me, it was a fun, it's kind of fun, just having that part of the business and trying to figure that piece out. You're just kind of casually dropping these different collabs he's done or opportunities he's gotten with like Judas and the Black Messiah or the J. Cole project. I really think that that's amazing that, he gets to take part in this, and in part it might be because of the relationships you guys have built, the music that you guys put out, the aesthetic, the coolness that surrounds what he does, and people just being attracted to that energy. I just think that I always encourage artists to continue to find collaboration opportunities where you can share fan bases and everybody benefit. So that's super dope. A Few Good Things, is that's the short film or a project and short film? That's what
that's the album title, and then we did a short film to go along with it. And yeah,
talk to
even
us.
just touching on your other blast point too, though, like I think a lot of artists, I will say that, with Saba, he's been good about not like recognizing and like executing on those opportunities when they come up. Because I think a lot of artists, again, it's like, there was 200 artists at those Dreamville sessions, and maybe 25 maybe got onto the project. Like Saba was there for 3 days and probably recorded verses on 20 songs with one that made it on the project. But there's other people that went there and didn't record anything. And so I think like he's just knows how to like get in that mode. And when it, opportunity comes up, or it's a situation that seems like inspires him or is worthwhile, like he's been good about finding ways to like get it done so that, it can lead and trickle into the next thing and the other things. Because each of those does, it's, there's things from being on that J. Cole Dreamville project that has led to other things. The Judas and the Black Messiah led to that next single that we released streaming better. And so it's easy to be like, oh, I don't have time. Or sometimes you might find out about something a day before, 24 hours before. You can either get it done or you can't. But like, I think he's been good about getting it done when those things have come up.
Yeah, and that's exactly where my build on small wins tagline comes from, because one win, I see some people, they get a win and they rest on it or over celebrate, whereas, you use that win to figure out what doors it can unlock to continue to build that momentum.
A few good things though. We were talking about the short film, because I think the short film's crazy. I think like, for him, he just even the prior album, I remember him mentioning wanting to do a short film eventually. Like I think at the time we weren't structurally or like didn't have the people in place for it. But the director is somebody that we had brought with us on the tour he did with JID. And they really got to just build a relationship there. And so as Saba was working on the album, he was just sharing this, private SoundCloud or playlist with him where they would, as he was working on demos or recording, like the director of the film would have like live real-time updates and be able to be brainstorming this kind of vision or, working on this dashboard or, treatment for the short film that really wanted to like tell this story of kind of crossing generations and kind of for Saba at this point becoming like a provider for his family and his community, where it kind of reflects back on how his grandmother was that for him, and his grandfather and his grandparents as a whole. And so, but a short film, I think for all of us, even for the director, was kind of the first time doing and producing something like that. And so, it's different, I'd say, from making an album. There's obviously some similarities, but I think there was just a lot, especially figuring out ways to film it during a pandemic where, getting people's flights and making sure people are tested and healthy is a hurdle, but also an expense. And so, through the director, we found like a really great production partner, this company Partisan, that has done work like this before. So I think through working with them, we were able to find staffing and people that could fill certain roles that were living in Chicago where we filmed it. And then really it was still, an incredibly expensive project. And so through some of the previous relationships really that we had, we were able to kind of find and bring different partners on to find, money to help cover the cost of this. Because I think initially when we got that budget, and it's the amount that it was, 6 figures, it's like, it can be intimidating, but I think it just goes back to, I think, just the trust and the relationships that like Saba, Christella, and I have developed together, where we kind of each found I feel like we maybe sort of spoke about it, but so much of it goes unspoken with us now, where I feel like we just find ways to each add value and play a role and to get done what it is that we like set out to do, where I think we just believe that it's all possible. It's just a matter of figuring out how to get it done. And, you know, from having worked together for 7 or 8 years now and had so many different partners and building our networks in these different ways over time, we were able to kind of lean back on some of those people that, of course, were excited, like loved the idea of being able to be involved with Saba's latest work or album or project. And, but, you know, really, I think finding ways to lean back on them or work with them made a huge difference for us being able to cover the cost of getting that done.
For sure. No, I mean, yeah. I mean, you want to work with people that know how to get shit done and don't come with problems, but just know how to, you know, find the solutions. But I think it's dope that, you know, the short film, you know, not that he's the first person to ever do a short film, but I think artists have to get in the mode of thinking more more creatively to stand out these days amongst all the content, all the other artists and all the other different forms of content you're competing against. So I think that's super dope. But
that's
man,
what we thought about, like how it adds value, you know, because it's like you don't want to just put a bunch of money into something that just feels like an extended music video.
right.
Where I think a lot of people put a short film, they'll call it a short film, but it would just be like an extended music video.
Right.
So I think it's like, and really thinking about that, it's so easy, I think, for early for artists and really at any point for artists to like overspend, where I think we've been like very good about it. Obviously, there's always going to be some moments or times where you might regret spending something on something, but I think, you know, seeing what works and then figuring out your game plan based on that, you know, where it's like if you don't have you might want to build your YouTube following and these things, but it's like finding a director that can grow with you rather than just dropping $5,000 when you might not have $5,000 or ever even made $5,000 off a song. So it's like, don't spend $5,000 on a video if you haven't done that. So I think it's, you know, and I think at different points in his career, he's done a great job of like finding those different people in different roles, whether it's managers or a video director or a photographer or videographer to come on tour that then develops to a point where they're making a short film together, or, you know, all these different things where it's kind of like grows and builds a relationship over time to become what then the people might see or experience as something that, you know, they don't see all the work that goes on in the background or all the time that's spent building that relationship to get it to a point where an artist and a director are on the same page or similar wavelength to where they can create something like that.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, man, I'd love to continue talking. I know there's a billion other things we could discuss, but I think we covered a lot of very important things for up and coming artists and just people that want to be in this music industry, things that they should know. Is there any last things you want to mention, or just let people know where and how to find you if you're on, you know, I know you're on Twitter and Instagram, but you feel free to shout out whatever you'd like to shout out. I know you're on tour at the moment as well. So, you know, share anything that you think folks need to know.
And I just want to share my gratitude and thank yous to you for doing these sessions that you do. I feel like it's super important. And even like when I've tuned into a couple of them in the past, like seeing the way that people come and engage each week, or they may come in once or twice, like whatever it is, maybe they've never even come to these sessions, but they follow you on Instagram and Twitter and the information you're putting out for people. But I think it's all like just such important information. And I think also people knowing that there's not any one right way or wrong way to go about this. So it's like everything might not stick with you or be related to you, but I would hope that some people can take even a thing or two of what I've talked about or what we've talked about and apply it to what they're doing. But I just think overall, the community that you've built and the information that you've made accessible to people is like incredibly important. At the end, like ultimately, it's information. They have to like take it and apply it in whatever way they do. But I think having that information out there weekly, people can even go back on a whole catalog of episodes and go through it. So I think it's all just really like important information for people to hopefully then be able to take and then apply to what they're doing. Because
Yeah.
it's the wild, wild west. I think it's like you can make it, anybody can make it happen. Like, but I think it is like be willing to like step outside and take the risks, or like find ways to you yourself as a manager or as an artist, like grow outside of what you're used to or comfortable with. If I never, I don't, I'm sure I would have found a way to do something if I stayed in Pittsburgh, but like by me moving to New York, just that step was so crucial and important to where it's how I met you. It ultimately is how I met Saba. You know, granted, maybe people can do it now without doing that, but I think whatever it is that step is to get you closer or at least help you develop a skill set, I just encourage everybody to do that, because I think if you can provide value, I think you can find a way to do something
For sure.
with somebody.
For sure. Well, I definitely appreciate those words, man. It's the reason why we do this. It's information that I wish I would have had access to back in 2008, you know, because I jumped into music without having any industry connects or, you know, knowledge about the industry. So, you know, hopefully this helps people build their businesses. And even though my sessions won't be continuing, you know, I'll still be working to help independent artists and producers build their businesses. I'll just be working in a different capacity. But we also have the MEC podcast that'll continue. So make sure you guys tap into that. Rory, thanks again, man. I'm going to catch you guys on tour. Enjoy yourselves. Be safe. Kill it. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast now, but Payne will be live on Thursday. I'm not sure who his guest is. As always, I never remember who his guest is, but I'm sure it'll be a dope session. So make sure you tap in. Peace.